This historic photograph shows the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in full operation before the 1986 disaster. 4 RBMK-type reactors, blocks 1, 2, 3, and 4, stand intact with clean white facades, modern Soviet architecture, and surrounding green landscaping. The structures appear orderly and powerful, with cooling chimneys and auxiliary buildings visible at the time. Shortly after the disaster at reactor number 4, teams of liquidators were deployed to clear the roof of reactor number 3 to prevent fires from spreading and threatening the neighboring block. This photograph shows these men, often referred to as human robots or bio-robots, working on the roof armed with shovels. Protective suits were minimal, simple masks or handmade lead aprons. The bitumen on the roof melted under heat, sticking to their boots, while burning pieces of graphite littered the area. They could only stay for about 40 seconds per stint, as radiation levels reached 20,000 to 30,000 Roentgen per hour, enough to deliver a lethal dose in under a minute. These sequence of actions, filmed in grainy black and white, capture both desperation and heroism, men risking everything to prevent a larger catastrophe. This photograph shows fire station number 6 in Pripyat, also known as SVPCH-6, the city's paramilitary fire brigade building. Located on Zavodskaya Street, this fire station served both the city of Pripyat and, when necessary, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. On the night of April 26, 1986, its crew became the 2nd Brigade to respond to the reactor explosion and ensuing fires, arriving just after the primary NPP fire teams. This station was more than just infrastructure. It was home to brave men, including Vasily Ignatenko, Viktor Kibanok, and Nikolai Titanok, who entered the danger zone to fight fires, fully aware of the risks. This building, now abandoned, stands as a silent testament to their courage. This is a portrait of Valery Alexeyevich Legasov, the leading Soviet chemist and one of the first experts dispatched to Chernobyl after the explosion. As the chief scientific advisor, he assessed the causes of Reactor 4's failure, pressured the government to evacuate Pripyat quickly, and delivered a candid public report at the IAEA conference in Vienna. His decisive honesty helped shape the global response to the disaster, but also led to political backlash. 2 years later, overwhelmed by what he had witnessed and suppressed at home, Legasov tragically took his own life. This aerial shot was captured from a helicopter a few weeks after the April 1986 explosion at reactor number. The image reveals the full scale of devastation. The reactor building is torn apart, with debris scattered across the grounds and the turbine hall crippled. Smoke has largely dissipated, but the damage remains unmistakable. Helicopters flying overhead had begun decontamination efforts, dropping sand, lead, and boron onto the damaged core in an attempt to suppress further radioactive release. This view offers a stark visual of the disaster's impact, the abandoned site, and the beginnings of containment operations. During decontamination work over reactor number 4, a Soviet Mi-8 helicopter accidentally struck a crane cable with its rotor blades. The aircraft immediately lost control and crashed near the reactor site. All 4 crew members aboard were killed instantly. The tragic accident highlights the deadly conditions faced by pilots working amid the aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster. In this photograph, a liquidator is undergoing a medical examination in a specialized clinic following the initial exposure to high radiation levels. Doctors are situated outside the sterile isolation chamber, using glove boxes or sealed ports to safely assess vital signs and blood samples without direct contact. This scene highlights the improvised medical response under emergency conditions, limited protective equipment, and experimental treatments to save lives. Many liquidators were transported to Hospital Number 6 in Moscow, the only Soviet facility equipped to treat acute radiation sickness. Advanced interventions, such as bone marrow transplants, were attempted under extreme pressure. Despite these efforts, dozens succumbed to injury, and survivors face lifelong consequences. This photo shows rows of Soviet buses lined up at the edge of Pripyat, ready to evacuate the city's 49,000 residents. The evacuation began quietly, with little warning. Officials told citizens they would only be gone for a few days, asking them to take minimal belongings. documents, food, and clothing. In truth, they would never return. Over 1,100 buses were mobilized from nearby towns and military fleets, forming one of the largest emergency evacuations in Soviet history. Within just a few hours, the once busy city was emptied. The streets fell silent, homes were left as they were, toys on the beds, food on the tables. This is the German-built MF2 Joker robot, sent to clear debris from the roof of reactor. It was expected to replace human workers, but in reality it lasted only a few minutes under extreme radiation before its electronics failed and it got stuck in the rubble. Despite being designed for harsh environments, radiation levels above 15,000 R per hour fried its circuits. Ultimately, it had to be abandoned on the roof and was retrieved months later. Dosimetrists were among the most critical specialists during the Chernobyl cleanup. Their job was to measure radiation levels in various zones, rooftops, trenches, building interiors, and determine how long other workers could safely stay. Armed with handheld dosimeters and wearing minimal protection, they ventured into the most contaminated areas before anyone else. Often working alone or in pairs, they had to mark hot zones, find safer paths, and constantly report data to the command center. Many of them received high doses of radiation, sometimes unknowingly. Yet without their precise work, the cleanup operation would have been blind and far more deadly. Engineers and miners bored a tunnel beneath reactor and poured a massive reinforced concrete slab to support the sarcophagus built above the wrecked reactor. This foundation slab was designed to prevent radioactive contamination of groundwater and anchor the concrete structure from below. Once completed, it allowed construction of the sarcophagus to proceed safely, keeping workers from needing to stand on unstable ground. This was an essential first phase in containing the radiation long term. After the Chernobyl disaster, thousands of vehicles used in the cleanup, including trucks, helicopters, tanks, and buses, were so heavily irradiated that they could no longer be safely operated or decontaminated. These machines were driven or towed into vehicle graveyards, vast open-air fields where they were either parked for decades or buried under soil and concrete to contain radiation. Some sites, like the infamous Razovka scrapyard, became chilling reminders of the scale of contamination. Bulldozers and cranes dug trenches and sealed tanks and trucks in layers of earth. Even decades later, these locations remain dangerously radioactive, with occasional efforts to rebury or shield exposed machines. These ghost fleets are a haunting symbol of humanity's attempt to control the uncontrollable. This photo shows the original sarcophagus built over reactor number 4 at Chernobyl in 1986, a giant concrete and steel structure officially called Object Shelter. It was constructed in just 206 days after the disaster, under extreme radiation. Thousands of workers, engineers, soldiers, and so-called liquidators risked their lives to contain the deadly reactor core. The structure used 400,000 cubic meters of concrete and 7,300 tons of steel, all built remotely or under time-limited shifts to avoid lethal exposure. The sarcophagus wasn't perfect. It was rushed, cracked in places, and never meant to last more than a few decades. But it stopped most of the radiation from spreading into the atmosphere and gave the world time to plan better long-term solutions. To this day, it stands as both an engineering feat and a haunting reminder of what happens when human technology fails. These haunting interiors belong to apartments left behind by the 50,000 residents of Pripyat, the workers' city built for Chernobyl nuclear power plant, employees and their families. When evacuation was ordered, people were told they would return in just a few days. They left toys, furniture, dishes still on the table, and family photos on the walls. But they never came back. Today, these rooms are frozen in time, peeling wallpaper, children's dolls covered in dust, gas masks lying on the floors. Some furniture still stands, while floors collapse from age and weather. It's like walking into a life interrupted. These images remind us not just of the scale of the disaster, but also of the personal lives suddenly cut off, of normal days that ended in silence. This rusting Ferris wheel stands in the middle of Pripyat's amusement park, a place that never truly opened. The park was scheduled to launch on May 1st, 1986, for the May Day celebrations. But just 5 days before, Reactor number 4 exploded, and Pripyat was evacuated. According to some accounts, the rides may have operated briefly on April 27th, the morning of the evacuation, to calm the public. Others say it was never used at all. This photo shows a group of Chernobyl liquidators, the workers and soldiers who cleaned up the radioactive ruins of reactor number 4. They wear thick lead-lined aprons, makeshift shields meant to protect vital organs from gamma radiation. Sometimes they also wore metal neck guards or carried lead-lined tools, but the protection was minimal, often symbolic, as the radiation levels in some areas were still dangerously high. This massive steel structure is the Duga radar, a Soviet over-the-horizon early warning system designed to detect incoming U.S. nuclear missiles. Hidden in the forest just a few kilometers from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, it was part of a highly classified military base known as Chernobyl 2. The structure stands over 150 meters tall and nearly 500 meters long, making it one of the largest radar systems ever built. In the 1970s and 80s, it emitted a repetitive tapping noise across shortwave radio frequencies, earning it the nickname the Russian woodpecker. For years, amateur radio operators worldwide were baffled and annoyed by the sound, not knowing its origin. After the Chernobyl disaster, the station was abandoned. Today it looms like a rusting skeleton in the woods, a symbol of Cold War secrecy, nuclear ambition, and ultimate collapse. This solemn site at Matino Cemetery in Moscow is the final resting place of several of the first firefighters who responded to the explosion at reactor in Chernobyl. These men, including Vasily Ignatenko, Vladimir Pravik, and others, were among the earliest to arrive at the burning reactor just minutes after the blast. Unaware of the invisible radiation threat, they fought fires on the roof and around the facility, believing it to be a routine emergency. Within days, many of them suffered acute radiation syndrome, ARS. They were transferred to Hospital Number 6 in Moscow, where doctors struggled to save their lives. Despite heroic medical efforts, most died within 2 to 3 weeks of exposure. Their graves are marked by black granite headstones with etched portraits, names, and the same date of death, May 1986. Today, this site stands not only as a place of mourning, but as a tribute to their sacrifice, young men who faced a nuclear disaster with courage and paid with their lives. This is the basement of Hospital Number 126 in Pripyat, where the uniforms of the first Chernobyl firefighters were discarded after they were rushed in with severe radiation burns. The men, including Vasily Ignatenko and others, arrived still in their contaminated gear. After receiving emergency treatment, their clothing was stripped off and thrown into the basement. But the radiation didn't leave with them. Decades later, these firefighter jackets, helmets, and boots still remain in the darkness, too radioactive to be safely removed. The Geiger counter clicks violently here, even now. One of the first robots deployed at Chernobyl was the STR-1, a radio-controlled transport robot based on the Soviet lunar rover design. It was sent to the roof of reactor to clear radioactive debris before human workers entered the area. STR-1 successfully handled a portion of the cleanup, removing some of the most hazardous graphite and fuel fragments. But radiation levels reached up to 10,000 roentgens per hour, and despite hardened electronics, the robot eventually failed. Engineers removed it by crane or helicopter, but most robots broke down quickly under such extreme conditions. Flowing past the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, the Pripyat River became an unlikely symbol of post-disaster life. In the warm waters near the reactor's cooling pond, divers and tourists have spotted enormous catfish, some measuring over 2 meters, 6.5 feet, long. These giant fish have fascinated people for decades. Many assume their size is due to radiation mutations, but in truth, it's biology, not fallout. With no fishing, few predators, and an abundance of food, the catfish had ideal conditions to grow large and live long. Just a few hundred meters from reactor number 4 lies the Red Forest, named for the reddish-orange hue the trees took on after the explosion. When the reactor blew, it released a massive cloud of radioactive dust and particles. The pine forest downwind absorbed such extreme radiation that the trees literally changed color and died within hours. This area receives some of the highest radiation levels ever recorded in a natural environment. The trees didn't burn, but they withered where they stood. Needles turned rust red, trunks dried up. Soviet bulldozers later flattened the forest and buried the contaminated biomass in trenches, creating radioactive graveyards beneath the soil. Today, the red forest remains one of the most toxic places in the exclusion zone, and radiation levels are still dangerously high. Yet, paradoxically, some animal species have returned, nature reclaiming the silence left behind. This photo shows the remains of the control room of reactor number 4, the place where the chain of mistakes and tragic decisions began. Before the explosion, this room was filled with blinking lights, monitors, and engineers overseeing the test that ultimately spiraled out of control. After the disaster, the control room became an epicenter of radiation. The panels were shattered, the instruments melted or torn away. Today, it's a haunting shell of its former purpose, a silent reminder of how human error, pressure, and flawed design collided in a deadly moment. This image shows the checkpoint Pripyat, one of the main controlled entry points into the Chernobyl exclusion zone. A barrier gate, radiation warning signs, a small building, and uniformed guards mark the boundary between normal life and the contaminated 30-kilometer area around the reactor. Here, entering vehicles undergo passport checks, belongings and dosimeters are inspected, and radiation screening is mandatory. Only escorted visitors with official permits are allowed to proceed. The atmosphere is sober and tense. This border separates safety from one of the most radioactive places on Earth. These images show handheld Geiger counters, radiation detectors, recording extraordinarily high readings in various radioactive hotspots around Chernobyl. At some hotspots, like beneath the old sarcophagus or near contaminated objects, readings reached hundreds to thousands of microsieverts per hour, making exposure for more than a few seconds dangerous. These visual moments highlight the invisible hazard, radiation you can't see, but which a single meter can expose in an instant. This image captures the Azure swimming pool, once a lively indoor sports complex in Pripyat, featuring a 5-lane pool and a gymnasium. Despite the Chernobyl disaster, it remained in operation, primarily by liquidators, until the late 1990s, when it was finally closed. It was considered one of the cleanest places in the exclusion zone due to regular decontamination. Now, the building sits empty and silent, cracked tiles, empty diving boards, and glass windows shattered or missing. This eerie decay makes it a powerful visual metaphor, a reminder of a vibrant community cut off at the seams by catastrophe. These images reveal the crumbling interiors of abandoned laboratories and medical rooms in Pripyat, places once used for research, treatment, and radiation analysis. Rows of dusty glass bottles, scattered slides, medical instruments, and soil sample jars sit untouched for decades. Once a vibrant hub for families in Pripyat, the children's cinema Prometheus now stands in haunting silence. Constructed in the early 1970s, it was designed specifically for young audiences, featuring colorful interiors and a whimsical facade. Inside, the cinema boasted a spacious hall adorned with murals, a cozy lobby, and a small cafe where children and parents could enjoy snacks before or after the show. Today, the building is a shell of its former self. The exterior, though still recognizable, is weathered and overgrown with vegetation. The once bright murals have faded, and the interior is filled with debris and remnants of its past life. Despite the decay, the structure remains a poignant reminder of the city that was lost. This image depicts a typical Soviet-era peaceful atom propaganda motif, a dove or stylized atomic symbol meant to convey that nuclear energy brings safety, progress, and societal benefit. Posters like this adorn public places in Pripyat, schools, cultural centers, and power plant facilities, casting a futuristic glow over everyday life. After the disaster, the slogan became deeply ironic. The promised peace turned into destruction, and the same atom touted as friendly became a silent killer. The contrast between the hopeful imagery and the real consequences of the 1986 accident is both poignant and chilling. Today, a massive steel structure, known as the new safe confinement, covers the remains of reactor number 4. Completed in 2016, it was designed to seal off radiation and prevent the further collapse of the old sarcophagus built hastily after the explosion. At 108 meters tall and over 36,000 tons in weight, it's one of the largest movable structures ever built by mankind. It stands not only as a shield, but as a reminder of the price of mistakes, the cost of silence, and the extraordinary effort to contain a disaster of global scale. As the decades pass, nature continues to reclaim the zone. But the new sarcophagus remains, a colossal monument, not to progress, but to caution.